Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News, or our monthly Ethereum and DeFi update with our friend Anthony Sassano. Welcome back, Anthony. How are you?
Good, Alex. Great to be back. Keen to talk about all the stuff that's happened in Ethereum the last few weeks.
It's been kind of a quiet period in some ways, but it's always just like the duck under the surface. Things are just going crazy and it's hard to keep up with. I was going to say, we've actually spun out another episode for NFTs specifically because otherwise I was kind of thinking like, gaming and NFTs, and you just can't cover everything. So that is out there as well for people that are interested in specifically NFTs. But as always, we're going to go over all the Ethereum DeFi stuff. So anything broad thoughts in particular, Anthony, over the past few weeks?
Yeah, I think, like as you said, it might seem like not much is happening because the markets are quiet. I think for a lot of people, right? Bitcoin started to wake up, so the rest of the markets kind of cooled off a little bit. We had the DeFi mania and then the cool off period. But in terms of building, there's so much happening still. I think the main themes are that a lot of teams on Ethereum are now looking at layer two solutions, right? Moving to layer twos, doing implementations, doing test nets. Synthetics is one of the most well-known apps that are doing their testnet now, where if you had a certain number of SNX and you wanted to stake it on the layer two system, you can. Saves you on gas fees and things like that. And then ETH2, of course, is around the corner. It's very close, at least phase zero of ETH2.
Yes.
And everyone's favorite EIP 1559, which is the fee burning EIP that some people might be familiar with.
Absolutely cool. We will get into all of that. I might just say at the start, the super tutorial I did, guys. So I've got that up on the screen at the moment. Particularly, that goes over in great detail the basics of MetaMask and how to resend stuck transactions, bit of online security. Because once you have your head around MetaMask, then I've got these other 50 apps where I kind of just show you briefly how they work, but they're all very similar. So that DeFi super tutorial, that's there for everyone to leverage that's wanting to learn all that stuff. But I think, as you say, it's kind of surprised me how quickly it's happened in terms of the layer two. So something like Loop Ring, nobody really knew of that 6 months ago. All of a sudden, people going, "Oh, Loop Ring, you can send transactions," and they've got this scaling solution. And then next thing you know, there's a product or a Lego piece that's building on top of them. Is it Rails? And I tried that out the other day, and it's amazing to see how quickly these other projects build on top of these other projects. It's that protocol sync thesis that the guys talk about, and it's really starting to speed up. Because remember when people were saying, "Oh, scaling, 2 years away," it's the big core teams that are all working on very similar things. Some of them working on it literally together. So once one team has it, they'll all have it. And then these other little projects using XDAI for some of them, Raiden for some of them, whatever's best for the individual project. But I honestly think before the end of the year, we're going to see some of the main projects fully scaled.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually think that it's been every week now that we're seeing a new layer two implementation either go live or be announced. Like another project is looking at it. And I saw this coming a few months ago when I saw that the research phase had kind of ended for a lot of these kind of projects. They had gotten to a point where they're like, okay, this technology is actually going to work. We think that it can apply to these projects. So they started reaching out to projects and getting them on board. And at the same time, we had the really high gas fees on Ethereum, right? So these projects were very interested because they're like, okay, well, we need to fix this now.
Yes.
And you mentioned some of them. There's a ton of others. You mentioned NFTs. There's Gods Unchained building their own NFT kind of marketplace, which is, so it's not just DeFi, right? It's other spaces on Ethereum as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, and they are the Aussie guys at God's Unchained, and they've partnered with Immutable X and Starkware. So that's a sort of ZK technology style scaling solution as well as privacy. But I think Vitalik specifically stated this month because his words got twisted in a prior statement about how everything's 2 years away, and then he came out and sort of specifically said, no, we're going to scale. We can be at thousands, if not a million, before we even get to these things of ETH2, and then they combine. So your sharding, staking, optimistic roll-ups. That's kind of the big one, isn't it? That everyone's waiting for. And then people say, well, oh, are they still going to use Raiden or Amisa Go? And it is case specific. But if you think about how they all plug in on top of each other, then we get to millions and billions of transactions per second once this is all rolled out. But we are going to be at thousands, if not millions, before ETH2 is finished, which is going to take 2 years. So that's important for people to understand, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think Vitalik put out a post that some people might have seen a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple weeks ago, called an Ethereum roll-up centric roadmap. So basically, what he says is that the Ethereum rollout goes phase zero, phase one, phase 1.5, and phase two. He says that we don't have to wait till phase two to get that scalability, because phase two is when you get the smart contracts and things like that on ETH2.
Yeah.
We can do it in phase one because we can use the shards in phase one as with optimistic rollups, for example. Now, I don't want to get too technical here, but basically what he's saying is that, yeah, to your point, that it's not going to take 2 years to scale. We've already got the layer two technologies here. They're already leveraging layer one, and then when ETH2 kind of phase one goes live, hopefully next year. We will see them using that as well. So and then as you said, that they can all talk to each other. There's going to be interoperability solutions coming, and Misego and Raiden, they're for different tasks, right? Every solution does something different. I personally think that there's going to be like only a handful that actually kind of get traction because you can't fragment it too much. But Amisego obviously has traction with with Tether. They were doing the Tether transactions there. Raiden's doing a lot of good stuff as well with payments. Yeah, and then all the other ones as well.
Interesting you say you think it's going to be a few. I kind of agree with that for the ecosystem, but then I also think if you don't need any interoperability and talking to other projects, Funfair might have their what they call fate channels, a type of state channel, and that's fine for their little game. And if they don't want to be interoperable per se with any other projects, then that's fine. So you could, in theory, have hundreds of slightly different little scaling projects that just specific for that one protocol. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think what I mean by handful, I mean like the technology that backs them up. Because all of these solutions are similar in what technology they use. They might tweak a few things here and there,
Yeah.
but the core technology I think there's only a handful of solutions that really retain all those properties that you want when scaling.
Yeah, and then from there, it might actually be very easy for the Funfair to talk to another app, even if they didn't set out to do that because of the way Ethereum does its standards. So anyway, I can't wait to watch this all unfold. It's getting faster and faster. One thing that I've noticed just from the sort of the macro side of things is the talk of interest rates and yield curves. So we actually had a project called Yield Protocol. Barn Bridge is another one, and they're building this yield curve. And for people at home, this can be boring stuff, but it's basically to try and get rid of those fluctuations because you don't know if the interest rate's going to stay at 5% or be at 20% in a month. And once we have a bit of stability and sort of market makers saying, well, this is basically the slope of the yield curve for DeFi, you can bring in all this professional money and hedging, and we are really starting to see that. And at the same time, we're seeing the SEC, the controller of the currency, the CFTC, literally some of their statements this month, I can't remember, you might remember the exact words, but saying that, Ethereum's just this brilliant innovation, DeFi is going mainstream, everything's probably going to be tokenized. These are amazing quotes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the CFTC chairman's one is the one that went viral, where he basically said, while Bitcoin is like email, Ethereum is like the internet, right? Because, Bitcoin does one thing very well, and then Ethereum does a bunch of other things, on top of that. So, but yeah, in general, I think what we're seeing now is because we have these really, these really cool primitives and money Legos, if you will, within DeFi, we're now seeing a lot of people come in and say, okay, how do we professionalize this? How do we make it safe, low risk for the traditional finance world to start embracing it? And that's what projects like Barn Bridge are doing. That's what the yield curve, the point of that as well is to have that fixed, try and get it like a fixed rate, right? That doesn't vary, a lot, because that is one issue. Because when someone tells you, oh, you can get 20%, APY, well, it could be 5% in a month. So really, you're not really getting 20% for the whole year. And you can't make projections based on that. You can't make products around that. You can't say to someone, hey, put your money with us, you'll earn 10%. And then it drops to like 2%. They're like, what happened, right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's basically the maturation of DeFi, which is happening a lot faster than I thought it would.
Yeah, and even when I spoke to Raul in that big interview a couple of months ago, and he said, "Oh, we need a yield curve, and once we get that, it can all mature." And I sort of said to him at the time, "It's funny, problems tend to get solved in like days, weeks, or months, sometimes days, and it is happening before your eyes." So I don't know if I think I sent him the tweet and whatnot, so I'm not sure if he's read it, but just the pace that these things are happening, truly amazing. one thing you said then about how we kind of need all that to happen, it reminded me of back when we only had ETH, before we really had DAI, and we had the prediction markets, and I could bet you something's going to happen, and I might win the bet, but ETH's dropped 50%, and like it's just everything's out of whack. So it's the same in the world of finance. We need these things to be stable because all the derivatives that underpin that 5% fluctuation can make a huge difference in a world where central banks are talking about going negative. Just another reason for the trillions of dollars look to find a home in DeFi. I mean, just today there was another report out from, it was BlackRock, who are literally working with the Fed, and they said that they're downgrading US Treasury bonds because they're going to have to start to either print more money or do this huge spending. And we recommend people be underweight US Treasuries, and that's always been the safest investment and asset class throughout modern history. And, those words, and you look at, well, hold on, here's, even if DeFi yields go down a bit, it's still way bigger than what you're going to get in these markets. So tremendous, significant things are happening under the surface. There was one other thing I wanted to add there. The velocity of money. So you mentioned Bitcoin is kind of slowing and solidifying. And I mean, I'm in the camp where that can still have plenty of value. Bitcoin can still go to $100,000 and be super valuable without changing it all. But it's become very noticeable when you look at all the on-chain metrics about coins that are being hodled versus Ethereum and the stablecoin space, the velocity of money, just how quickly everything is happening there. So it's two sort of extremes of the system.
Yeah, I think, Bitcoin is optimized for that. Basically, the whole community says, it's a store of value. You hold it, right? That's the whole thing, right, with Bitcoin. And I can see the value in that for a group of people. You have big companies buying it and putting it on their balance sheets and things like that. So there is value there for those who seek that. And I'm with you. I don't spend too much time in the Bitcoin space, but I'm not going to say that I'm bearish on Bitcoin, for example, right? It's always been a really bad bet to make over
Yeah.
the years. But yeah, I think on Ethereum, because you have all these different tokens and things like that, you could have like high velocity of stable coins as like the payment token on Ethereum, and then you could have ETH as like the native store of value of the network, right? Where ETH will be used in staking. You have to use it to pay fees. People will actually hold it as a store of value. I know that might seem outlandish to some people that, something else can be a store of value, but it's all about a belief system. If enough people believe in it, right, then it definitely can. And ETH has the same properties as Bitcoin, right? And except maybe it doesn't have a cap on its supply, but we won't go into that. But in terms of like, you can send it really quickly over the network, right? It's divisible. It's really strong. It's really good. There's a bunch of things that are similar there. So I think, as more people wake up to that fact that it's not just BTC that can fill that role, I think, we might see some shifts in the market.
Yeah, I might bring that up while we're just talking as well. The Ethereum stock to flow that I often speak about. But one thing that's happened in the last, I think it's just the last month, we've got that $1 billion of Bitcoin that's now wrapped on Ethereum, and there's different flavors of that. I don't know. Do you want to speak to that a little bit, Anthony, while I bring this up?
Yeah. So I think it's actually at $2 billion now because the price went up, and I think it's about 170,000 Bitcoin. I think 0.8% of the supply or something. I saw some metrics flying around, and this is all basically living on Ethereum in a few different forms. So you have wrapped Bitcoin, which is the most popular one. This is a centralized solution, of course. This is it basically BitGo custodies the Bitcoin, and then they issue wrapped Bitcoin as a token on Ethereum, and you can go do whatever you want with it. But there's a backdoor where they can freeze your assets, right? So that might not be appealing to a lot of people. Then we have like synthetic Bitcoin, like SBTC in the synthetic system. And then we have another one that launched recently called tBTC, or trustless Bitcoin, which is actually attempting to make it so that when you bring Bitcoin over to Ethereum, it remains in your control. There's no backdoors. There's no centralized points of failure or anything like that. And then another one called renBTC as well. I shouldn't forget that. But yeah, renBTC is also very popular at the moment.
Yeah, and that's again that spectrum of centralized versus decentralized. Now, this is what I just wanted to show people quickly at home, because Anthony was kind of joking that Ethereum doesn't have a capped supply, and when you hear that, you go, well, that is not a good store of value. But what people are slowly starting to understand, and Vitalik even chimed in here, which is always great, is that when Ethereum moves to this new model where it's going to start to burn the fees, there's been so many fees lately that it's actually going to take the issuance negative. So even if we have 2% more Ethereum coming into supply because we're rewarding the miners or the stakers in future, we're at the point now where we'd be burning more than 2% of the Ethereum in fees. And so it's literally at that point off the chart because, as Vitalik says here, well, you can't really have a stock to flow once the number goes negative. In theory, it becomes infinity. So your arguments about scarcity causing things like gold, silver, diamonds, real estate, Bitcoin having value, that property alone, and of course there's lots of different things that make any asset valuable, but that property alone, Ethereum is going to be literally off the charts. So then you can start to say, well, hey, it does have all those other network effects. Some people are going to see it as value. I'm not sure where the story plays out there, but it's also interesting that you can now buy wrapped Bitcoin on Coinbase, for example. So you can actually, without ever touching real Bitcoin or entering the Bitcoin ecosystem, doing a Bitcoin transaction, you can go straight onto Ethereum with your wrapped Bitcoin and start to use it in all these different smart contracts and DeFi apps. So that in and of itself is also a big development.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically bypassing the whole Bitcoin network and just getting exposure to the price for those who want it. I don't know what the long-term implications of that is. It doesn't seem like it's the most bullish thing in the world, but at the same time, I know arguments will from the Bitcoiner side will say, oh well, that Bitcoin's off the Bitcoin network, it makes it more scarce or whatever. Which I can understand that. But to your point about Ethereum and kind of like how ETH is going to go, net negative in terms of supply, this is something that a lot of people, I would say most of the ecosystem doesn't actually understand. And if they did, I believe ETH would be worth a lot more. But this happens basically in ETH too, when the issuance rate of ETH is still perpetual, right? But it's very low. It's like 1% or lower, most likely. And then we have the fee burning on top of that. So if there's enough activity on the network and there's enough ETH being burned from fees, it can go net negative. So that is better than a capped supply, right? Bitcoin's never going net negative. Maybe in 100 years when there's no Bitcoins being left and the only way, Bitcoin goes net negative is if people lose their coins or whatever. But with Ethereum, in the next couple of years, this is what's going to be a reality. And I think a lot of people are going to be shocked once they actually realize that.
Yeah, and on the screen here, I've got the staking rewards and the adjusted reward, which adjusts for the inflation, because it's all well and good to say, hey, I'm getting this huge reward, but if we actually adjust for the inflation and the new coins and the dilution, then that changes things a lot. So when we actually look at some of these networks, this hasn't got the ones that I wanted to show you here. Why has it got the smaller market caps? I might be on the wrong section here. Staking providers calculator.
I know. I actually know what you're talking about. I've seen it as well.
I just want to
your
show
real
people.
yield is lower.
Yeah, the real yield on some of these staking assets that are basically offering a yield like Tezos that's fairly attractive, say 5%.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, Cosmos 8%.
But in reality, it's like 0.6% or 1.72%, right?
Yes, when you adjust for that inflation, like I was just talking about there. So what I want people to understand, as you just say, is once people go down the rabbit hole and realize, well, hey, Ethereum, it's not uncapped. All of a sudden, it's actually getting more scarce. But then you say all these other proof of stake chains or the yield that people are getting in DeFi, it just makes Ethereum more competitive, and it's all relevant. There's always going to be things that are better out there, things that are worse, but it's just more and more of that, dividend, reward, yield. It brings some percentage of all that money back into Ethereum.
Exactly. I wrote a piece a while ago in my newsletter, basically calling it a symbiotic relationship, where the usage of the network is no longer parasitic, where it doesn't drive value to ETH. Every single transaction on the network, because it has to pay fees, will drive value to ETH. So, and then, ETH price theoretically will go up. The network becomes more secure, and then those apps actually inherit that security. So it's a beautiful relationship, and I actually can't wait till we get to that point.
Now, one of the things you mentioned before was about a lot of the crap that got flushed out, and I think I was trying to be pretty clear with my messages that I don't think DeFi is a bubble. I think that some of the yield farming stuff and these exotic vegetables and whatever else it ended up being, I think that's the bubble that needs to be washed out. And as it was, I think that tweet was almost to the day when markets got crazy then and topped out. But what we've actually seen under the surface is the total value locked has continued to trend higher pretty nicely. So when we look at things like DeFi Pulse and the metrics, some of the best projects haven't even really had a hiccup. They've just continued to trend higher. Now, a little bit of a downtick here, but over the past 90 days, I think a lot of people, if you ask them, well, what happened to DeFi in August? Oh, the bubble popped. Well, not at all. It's continued to grow and strengthen. And I just think there's no understanding of this in the wider crypto community.
Yeah, me either. I think what ends up happening is that, new exciting things end up getting ahead of themselves and turn into little mini bubbles. And that's what we saw with, I like to call them food Ponzi's, because really most of them were just like Ponzi games, right? Where people would copy other projects and just set up some like money game, essentially, bring in some money, play musical chairs, and then the last one holding the bag was the one who lost out. But in terms of core DeFi and the actual project building real value, yeah, it's all been trending up, and it's going. I mean, it's accelerating so fast that even I'm having trouble keeping up with everything these days.
And I also think it's hard because I know even in our premium community, people are saying, oh, I'm kind of getting sick of this DeFi and the yield farming stuff. But it's a very fine line between like a scam and something like Sushi that set off and was on a pretty good path and had a really interesting concept. And then one developer pulls the rug and people go, oh, it's a scam, or it wasn't. And then something like Cream comes along, and I think that's it's a kind of a copycat, but in some ways it's also doing very unique things. Wi-Fi was like the love child of Andre, and everyone loved him and the project, and then he kind of fell out of favor a bit. But I just did a write up today, and I think I shared on Twitter as well, about how I think that Wi-Fi could be finally getting close to a bottom because it's just gone through that cycle of everyone loves it, it's crashed and burned, but underlying it, I think the whole concept of the best yield, get me the best reward, that's not going anywhere. That's very powerful.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Wi-Fi story. That is hilarious because I feel like Wi-Fi did in 2 months what a lot of coins do in years in terms of sentiment, right? It became like in favor, everyone loved it. It went up really high, everyone felt rich, and then it crashes and burns and everyone turns on everyone and starts getting toxic, right? So that did that in like two or 3 months at this point, and I watched it all play out in real time. And I'm with you. I think at this point they've been building quietly, right? While people have been out of favor with them, the price came down. But I think that we're going to see like a renaissance with Wi-Fi because they have their V2 strategies coming out. As you said, yield farming is not going anywhere. Yes, the yields came down, but it's still there. You can still get yields on your capital. Like, I know a lot of people that are still doing it. And Wi-Fi making it easy for people to do that is the whole point of it. And I think that's still going to be popular going forward. I mean, I think it's always going to be popular. So the short-term sentiment is definitely funny to watch, but it's not indicative of the long-term value.
No, and the Wall Street cheat sheet chart we've all seen with that cycle, and you look at the Wi-Fi chart, and it is exactly that. Any thoughts on Curve, Anthony? Because I know that's gone also through a serious crash and burn for a few reasons, but I actually think that that's a project that it's got a really interesting concept that could be brilliant under there somewhere. But I just think that it's the tokenomics or the way that they did the supply and demand initially was all out of whack, and that's been down like 90%.
Yeah, so there's this kind of meme within the DeFi community right now called uninvestable projects, right? Where the project is really, really good, but their tokenomics is so bad and the emissions are so high that the token price can't actually move with the fundamentals because it started off really high and then came down. This is exactly what happened with Curve, where they launched this token. The supply was basically near zero at the very start. So the price went to like, I think it topped at like $50 or something, where there was actually decent volume, right? There's always outliers. And then from then on, it's crashed. Like it's at like 50 cents. It kept crashing because they have yield farming going on where you can deposit your stable coins into Curve and earn the CRV token. And people that do this aren't going to hold the CRV token, right? They're just going to keep dumping it into the market. So this is why we've seen the price come down. And that's why people say it's uninvestable at this point. And I think it had like a fully diluted market cap of hundreds of billions of dollars, and now it's like a billion, right? Which I actually, not investment advice, but I think that's fair for Curve, because Curve's actually an amazing project, right? They have incredible usage, stablecoin swaps, like instant product market fit. So it's hard to value because of the constant emissions and the sell pressure. But in
Yeah, it's
terms of
number
like,
six. It's number six on DeFi Pulse here between
yeah,
synthetics and Aave.
yeah, exactly. It's a really great project, but yeah, their token basically rewarded the early investors and the team, and anyone else buying it, has gotten crushed at this point, which is unfortunate.
Another example of that is Filecoin. So Filecoin fits
Hmm.
into my, the decentralized Web3 thesis about building all these other layers that the software is going to run on top of. So a lot of that is kind of the hardware side of things. So decentralized file storage and computing. They launched, and early investors were on like 100x profits. And part of the system is that all the Filecoin sort of miners and storage computers had to buy this hardware, and it was expensive. And they actually need Filecoins to sort of like a software license, maybe you describe it as. It's kind of the utility part of it. But it was so expensive they almost couldn't buy it. And it's kind of like this death spiral where the miners can't afford it, and the network and it all crashes down on itself. So I think they've done some proposed changes, or have they already done the changes?
Yeah, I mean, Filecoin's another perfect example of a project that is definitely needed, provides an amazing kind of product and service, but the token, got way ahead of itself and has just been crashing since. But yeah, I think since that problem came about, they've made some changes around that. But still, the amount of tokens coming to market, I think from what I saw, is just so much. I just not don't see how the demand can match that, because you need so much demand, and I don't know where it would come from.
No, it's fully diluted. I think it was in the hundreds of billions as well. The Graph was another one the other day, like brilliant project, querying all the data and all the blockchains. But then the IPO or ICO, whatever they were doing, I think it was like 4%. That was all the tokens that they were going to sell to the community. And on Twitter, they said, oh, well, the team's been working really hard and they deserve it. And maybe they do, but that's when the other projects and communities come in and just say, well, we're going to hard fork you and we're going to have something that's fairer for the community. And so far, we've seen that fail because of stupid little mistakes like Sushi and the dev. But sooner or later, someone is going to come across with a good, solid team and not muck it up and execute well and create a far fairer system for one of these projects. And that's going to be something that's get hotly debated about, well, if anyone can copy anyone, how do you create value and loyalty? And I think it will come down to kind of like, your persona and reputation and the community that you've got, because otherwise everyone can keep copying you. So where does it stop?
Yeah, the graph is unfortunate because they've been around for a long time. They provide an amazing service to basically all of the DeFi apps, right? Without the graph, these DeFi apps wouldn't be able to show you all the fancy metrics they do on their front ends, right? For example. But yeah, I think they had like a ton of early investment rounds as well. So most of the supply got bought up by those people because so that's the thing. Those people and the early investors, the VCs, the funds, they saw the value, right? So they had FOMO just as like everyone else has FOMO. So they, use their connections, get in and everything. Not to say they don't add other value as well as, their money, but for teams that have that, I think sometimes the teams are like, wow, all these really high profile investors want to get involved with us. They can open up worlds for us beyond that, right? They have connections and things like that. So they end up giving up too much of their, I guess you can call it equity, but in this case, it's tokens. And this happens in the normal world as well, not just in crypto, where companies give up way too much of their equity early on, and then they regret it later because they're like, wow, my product's actually worth so much, and I gave up a lot of it for so little.
And it's become a game where you can see, well, how high can we get the first valuation? And then it's almost like it's the musical chairs, or just flip it to the next investor. But where there's some light at the end of the tunnel here is some of the newer concepts in Ethereum with the things like proof of attendance protocol, where you can get a token or an NFT that says, hey, I was here, or I attended this event, or I did this thing. And a lot of on-chain metrics, like how Uniswap retroactively drop tokens to all the users. In future, I think we're going to go to a place where I'm talking about this to Red Fox Labs, who are a new gaming project that have just come over to Ethereum because of all the ecosystem and things that you can do. And they might say, well, hold on, our new token sale or our new NFT sale, only people that have been active and loyal in our community are going to get first dibs, and once they've all had a chance to invest, then other people can. So there's going to be sort of digital ways that we can make things fairer, which I just love.
Yeah, and on the NFT subject, another project doing this is Axie Infinity. They're doing their own protocol token or their native token, and they basically said, anyone who's been playing the game is going to get some of the token, right? So, and I think it's funny because Uniswap did this, and then everyone's like, oh, what other projects don't have tokens yet? And like, we better go use them because we might get airdropped the token. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that's a fairer way of doing it for sure, making sure that the people that have used your product and your early community gets rewarded the most. Because otherwise, yeah, you just get the speculators that come in, and then your early community gets kind of like a shafted, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. One thing I don't, well, I'm going to have Axie Infinity on hopefully before they do their Binance IEO, because that's one thing that I always kind of, I cringe a little bit when I hear that. It's like such a good project. NFTs are hot at the moment. Why do you need to go to an exchange? You're going to sell out and raise millions anyway. So I'm going to be interested to hear what they say. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that was unfortunate. I don't know their reasoning. I haven't looked into it, but I would have preferred them to do it on Ethereum, right? You can use Balancer for things like that for I guess you can call it an initial exchange offering. You can use Mesa. It's like an auction platform. There's so many different things you can do on Ethereum that it was an odd choice for me that they did it on Binance, especially because Binance is a centralized exchange, doesn't have a great reputation within the Ethereum community, but they probably have their reasons. So yeah, I'll be looking out for watching your interview with them.
One thing that we've seen, and this is a trend, I think we've spoken about this in the past, is that Binance have got they launched Binance Chain and Binance Dex, and it was their venture. At the time, it was, I'm pretty sure they almost used that language where they were coming after Ethereum, or they wanted to be a competitor, and then it all sort of didn't work, and then they rebranded or just hoped that the community forgot, and they launched Binance Smart Chain and another Binance Dex, and now we've got FTX, which are going really aggressively with Serum and their kind of DEX and decentralized products to complement their centralized things. Now at the moment, there's been some criticism that it's centralized to begin with, even though it's meant to be decentralized. But forgetting all that, one thing that I like is that Coinbase and Brian Armstrong have always been very vocal and supportive of Ethereum. So you've got these other two giants that are going after and trying to capture market share because that's where all the money is. But then you've got Brian Armstrong, and I know some people love to hate Coinbase, but I actually think their ethos in that regard is really good. They've started to integrate a lot of the DeFi, a lot of the Web3, all those types of things into Coinbase, but also the Coinbase wallet, which is the custodian wallet where you have your own keys. So I love that they're going down that path when some of the other giants are going down the how can we make more money path.
Yeah, exactly. Coinbase has been extremely friendly to Ethereum and DeFi. They do a lot in the ecosystem, which has been awesome to see. But yeah, Binance and FTX are definitely not friendly. They, maybe it's being a bit harsh, but they seem like people that, I mean, I guess like their CEOs seem like people who love control, right? They want control. And you can't get that on Ethereum, right? You're not in control of anything. So from that lens, they probably think, oh well, I'm just going to make something. I'm going to make it better, whatever that means, right? And kill Ethereum or whatever. And I think it's been proven time and time again that that's actually way harder than people think it is. People think they can spin up something, call it like a smart contract chain or whatever that you want to call it, and then everyone will just come over. And that hasn't happened ever on any of these platforms to date. And especially Binance Smart Chain, they went the route of it's basically Ethereum, right? With I call it like a centralized Ethereum because you can use MetaMask with it and everything, right?
Yeah.
And it's more scalable. There's the lower fees, but you give up everything that makes Ethereum great.
Yeah.
So I don't see much happening in this space for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I mean, I should balance that by saying I love FTX and I do my trading there, but what they're going to have to do is make better centralized products or products that need to be centralized and keep innovating and giving the customer, like me, the trader, better things that I can't do in the other ecosystem. So there's good and bad with all of that, but I think they're just now running into that how can we get users, how can we get volume on our decks? Because Uniswap's, surpassed Coinbase and Kraken in terms of those numbers that they're doing, really tremendous. And I think was it in Q3, it was with 100x growth. Anyway, absolutely just exploded onto the scene, didn't they, in Q3?
Yeah, they did. And I think what's happening, and from that growth, what's happening now is that centralized players are doing a land grab, right? Where they're basically saying this thing's coming and it's coming fast. The thing being DeFi. How do we get a piece of it, right? How do we get and position ourselves competitively within the space before this runs away from us? Because their businesses are fundamentally being challenged and being disrupted. So I don't blame them for fighting it and for trying to grab some land for themselves. I just don't agree with their strategy. I'm with you. I think that Binance and FTX should focus on what they do best, and that's the centralized solutions, and compete in that arena. But I in the long term, I think that the decentralized solutions are just going to beat them anyway. So maybe they feel that too, and then that's why they're trying to do this little land grab.
I think that's basically a lot of what I had, Anthony. Ernst and Young bought out another professional suite of products for the top end of town. Brave hit number one browser on the Google Play Store, beating out Google on their own Play Store. So yeah, we really gained traction. MetaMask 1 million users this month. Any other points you had?
Yeah, I mean the MetaMask 1 million users. I think that was for last month. I'm not sure what it is this month, but was incredible. I wrote a little bit about this where I said that MetaMask active users is the best kind of metric we have for real people, right? Because everyone uses different addresses on Ethereum. I could use 10 different addresses, and people will say, "Oh, there's 10 active addresses." Well, no, it's just me, just little old me. Whereas with MetaMask, people don't have really multiple MetaMask accounts. You might have one on your phone and one on your PC, but you're not going to have like lots of different ones. It's not feasible, and it's not something that you would usually do. So yeah, and it actually surprised me. I didn't think there were that much people. Like even if we halve that number and say that everyone has like a mobile wallet and a desktop wallet, 500,000 monthly active users. Is huge, right? A lot bigger than I think a lot of people think it was, but it makes sense considering how hot the market got. Especially with Uniswap, with the Uni airdrop, right? Everyone's like, oh, wow, I get a free, like, whatever it was, $2,000. Of course, I'm going to come and claim that with my MetaMask, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was incredible.
Are you referring to like installs? You're not referring to addresses where I can have MetaMask and have three different addresses. You're referring to, I've got MetaMask installed on my computer and then MetaMask, the app, installed on my phone. So you might have two installs. That's different to each of them might have 20 addresses. So what's actually counting is app installs. That's the million figure, isn't it?
Yes, correct. From my understanding,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be a lot higher if they counted all the individual accounts. I'm not even sure if they can see that. I'm not sure how they track things, but yeah, definitely the active kind of like users of their Chrome extension or their Firefox extension, rather than the addresses inside of them.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really looking forward to catching up next month. I think we're going to see the first little green shoots of some of the big household names with scaling solutions, and I might have to do an updated tutorial to show you actually how easy it is. And people are going to start to be blown away that it's going to get to the point where it's as good as a centralized exchange in terms of the speed and execution and the games that we're playing. Start to have some meetups, hopefully, in Decentraland. Any other thoughts to add, Anthony?
I think next month we might have a lot to talk about with regards to ETH2 as well. That's coming. I think from my reading, in the next like less than 2 weeks, there's going to be what's called the deposit contract is going to go live, and then phase zero, I think, targeting for a December launch. So maybe next month we'll know more exact dates. So that's going to be exciting.
I'm not sure if you want to do a little bit of a speculative sort of challenge here, but we've mentioned like Wi-Fi, Curve. I think Maker is one that had to basically peg their interest rates so low because they couldn't get the DAI peg to stay at $1. They've got to raise that again, which means they're collecting money in fees, and they're super profitable. And I don't think the market's priced that in either yet. So, are there any like projects that you are buying on this dip, or that you think are unloved? We've mentioned those three. It might be a bit of fun each month just to sort of point to one and say, "Hey, I think the market's not really looking here. Might have a bounce back."
Yeah, I think I always like to buy when the market's ignoring something. That's typically the best time to buy it. So in terms of DeFi in general, I think is approaching a bottom or has found a bottom at this point. just the most popular DeFi tokens, as you said, like MKR. I think definitely think the market is not pricing MKR right for considering that the DAI supply has grown so much. And they can just turn on fees, as you said, and then those fees go to burn their MKR tokens. Wi-Fi has gone through that whole Wall Street hype cycle. It's been berated. No one's talking about it anymore. So just things like that. Whenever no one's talking about it, that's when I love to buy, especially when I know the project is still building and not dead and has like things coming out and people are just ignoring it. That's typically the best time.
Yeah, if we get a little bit of a sell off at the moment in traditional markets, and I think there's a little bit of fear around for this wave two or whatever it is, if we have a sell off and crypto markets go down, there could be some blood in the street type scenarios. And that's where I think that's the final capitulation after we've played out these Wall Street patterns, that I'd be getting very busy with my funds if you've taken some profits and you've been patient or whatnot. So let's circle back and see how we go with that next month.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, full disclaimer, it can always keep going down, right? No one has a crystal ball. We've been tied to macro a little bit over the last few months. So, the US presidential elections in like 3 or 4 days, right? Things could get rocky there. So it's just so much uncertainty with the macro space that kind of gives me pause. But at the same time, maybe people are looking for that flight to safety, right? And maybe crypto is ironically the flight to safety.
There is that much money around that maybe it is, and it has started to decouple a little bit. Have you placed any bets? Because I've seen the prediction markets again that are built on top of Olga and Gnosis. There's one now where you can bet directly from Twitter, I think.
Yeah, there's one called actually Polymarket, which is getting a bit of traction, and they're actually on layer two, so it's cheap to place bets. Their most popular market is the Trump versus Biden market, of
I was going to
course.
say, yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to go bet on that, you can. There's decent liquidity, decent volume. So, but no, I haven't done any yet. Maybe I'll do one for the presidential election. I'm not going to say who I'm gonna vote on, but that might be a fun one to do.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us, Anthony. I hope you guys have enjoyed that. It should all be time stamped. But yeah, leave any questions for next month, the things you want us to discuss, underrated projects, and we'll see you next month. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.